Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing happy, amazing and positive as always. Today I've got for you guys a little bit of a different video, and this is a video about some of the most evil murderers of our century. I'm going to be talking about some of the worst murderers to date, and this is going to be a short list only because I don't want to bombard you guys with all these different pieces of information, but I genuinely was distraught as I was researching these people, and I couldn't believe that I hadn't heard two of the three people that I'm going to be talking about, especially because they went on to do some really, really horrible things. And you know, these were like really famous, you know, in the public eye kind of cases. But I'm going to give you guys my disclaimer right now that this is probably one of the most intense videos I've ever done. So just know that I talk about a lot of gory, violent and graphic details with these people and their cases. So if you are really sensitive to that kind of thing, please click out. I've got a lot more lighthearted content that you can watch. I also talk a lot about sexual assault and you know, those kinds of triggering information. So like I said, please click out if you are sensitive to this. Also, I wanted to give another disclaimer that all the pieces of information that I found on these cases, I found through the internet, through news reports, news articles, videos, things of that nature. So I understand that not all pieces of information are going to be 100% accurate, but I've done my best to cross-check information to provide as accurate and detailed information as possible. This video is purely for educational purposes only. Also guys, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It will help me out so much. And please don't forget to like and comment on this video, and please leave suggestions on any cases that you would like me to cover. Okay, so I'm going to jump right into it. These are intense, like I said, so please brace yourself. You may or may not have heard of some of these people, but today I'm going to talk about three particular criminals. Okay, so the first person that I'm going to be talking about is Pedro Lopez. Pedro Lopez is known as a serial killer, convicted of killing more than 110 young girls. Pedro was born on the 8th of October 1948 in Colombia. He was the seventh of his 13 siblings, and he was known to be quite a polite boy growing up. He had aspirations of becoming a teacher. He was kind to people. He was just a normal young boy. That was until he turned 8 years old, and he was actually kicked out by his mother because she caught him doing inappropriate acts to his sister. And when Pedro fled, he was actually abducted by a stranger who was actually a pedophile. And sadly, Pedro at a very young age would be assaulted by this man. So essentially at this point, Pedro was actually an orphan, and he was taken in by a US family. So he was enrolled in school, and his life seemed as if it was, you know, back on track. But when he was going to school, he was actually molested by a teacher, and because of this, Pedro ran away. So fast forwarding to 18 years old, he was not working legally. He was actually working illegally by selling stolen cars and selling them to the local chop shops. So eventually he actually got caught and was sent to prison, and when he was in prison, he would get assaulted by some of the inmates there. This allegedly caused him to go on a rampage, and he actually would hunt down these people that did this to him in the jail and kill them. Whether that's true or not has not been 100% confirmed, but this is what some of the reports were saying. So he was released in the year of 1969, and he moved to Peru. And while he was in Peru, this is where the horrible murders started happening. He would kill young girls between the ages of 9 and 12. He would go to some of the markets that were in the country and he would stalk young girls for a couple of days. He would kind of pick out his victims who were helping their parents in some of their stalls, and he would watch them for a few days. And he said later on that he would actually look for little girls who looked beautiful and had an innocent look about them. If that isn't bone chilling, it makes me so mad to think that there was this guy just sitting there, you know, staring and watching these young girls for a few days, working on his plan to lure them in. So when these little girls were alone, he would lure them from the markets with pieces of jewelry. Then he would take the child and sexually assault them and then strangle them to death. And after he did so, he would dispose of the bodies in a shallow grave that he had picked out to put these bodies in. By 1978, he would have killed 100 young girls. Eventually, he was actually caught by a member of an indigenous tribe, and the tribe decided to take matters in their own hands and execute them. But a US missionary actually went to the tribe and found out that they were going to execute this man. And they told the tribe, look, hand him over to us and we will do whatever it takes to bring justice to these families. So the tribe handed Pedro over, and sadly, and very, very unfortunately, he was very soon released. For some unknown reason, the police never punished him for what he did. He was never charged at this point in time. He was let go. He was free. Pedro moved back to Colombia for a bit and also to Ecuador. And later he claimed that when he was in Colombia and Ecuador, he would actually kill about 3 young girls per week. And it's like he was talking about this as if this was a full-on job for him. He would talk about these young girls as if they were just objects. So then Pedro was officially caught in 1980 when an attempted abduction went wrong for him. He then straight away confessed to about 103 murders, 53 of which whose bodies were found. However, later on he actually confessed to sexually assaulting and killing about 350 young girls across Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. Police at first absolutely did not believe that Pedro would have done this, that any human being would be capable enough to do such a heinous act. However, a mass grave was actually discovered by police, which contained the bodies of many of his victims. That would honestly be such like a heartbreaking thing to discover and to see as well. Like, I wouldn't even be able to imagine seeing so many bodies just stacked up like that. That would make me so sick to my stomach. So the case went to trial, and unfortunately, Pedro was only sentenced to 16 years in prison. And to make matters worse, he only served 14 of those 16 years. He was released on good behavior, and after he was released, he was deported very quietly back to Colombia, where he spent the next 3 years in a psychiatric facility. After 3 years in this facility, he was declared sane and was released on a $70 bail. And very soon after his release from this facility, he escaped. Pedro calls himself the man of the century. He thinks he is some kind of hero. He says the reason that he committed these murders was for revenge against the people that gang raped him in prison. And also he says the reason behind all of this was because of how badly he was mistreated by his mother. Since Pedro's release, he's actually been a suspect in connection to another murder. However, the police have not been able to find him, and his whereabouts is still a mystery. So that was the first guy. I know it was heavy. What a disgusting person. And to make matters worse, this guy was released and this was probably living his best life after this. He probably hid somewhere where no one knew him and just lived a peaceful life, which I believe he absolutely did not deserve. The parents of these children that were murdered, they believed that the kids were stolen or human trafficked or sold or just got lost. Some of these parents even thought that their kids ran away. And to know that a man that did this to your kids is now free, or was free back then, would be so hurtful, and it would just be such a betrayal of justice. The next guy that I'm going to be talking about is Javid Iqbal. Javid Iqbal was a Pakistani serial killer and pedophile who confessed to killing and sexually abusing 100 children from ages 6 to 16. To think that these people can so easily just kill young kids like that, or kill anyone for that matter, is just sickening. Like, you almost believe that they are not human. There's no way that a human being could do something so evil. Javid Iqbal was born in 1956 in Lahore, Punjab, Pakistan. He was the 6th of the 8 siblings he had, and he was actually born into quite a well-off family. His father was a businessman, and Javid actually wanted to follow the footsteps of his father, so he too started his own business in 1978. His father, like I said, was quite well off, so he actually bought Javid 2 villas. One of the villas he would conduct his business, which was a steel recasting business, and the other villa he would live in with a few other boys. Everything seemed totally fine in Javid's life until in 1999, the Pakistani police received a confession letter. And this confession letter was by Javid Iqbal. Javid confessed in this letter that he had killed 100 young boys in the span of 6 months. He claimed that he would lure in kids who were mostly beggars and orphans and would take them to his villa, where he would sexually assault them and strangle them to death. After he had killed them, he would dismember his victims' bodies and put them in vats of acid to dissolve their bodies for no evidence. He then would dump them in a local river. Police went and searched his house with Javid nowhere in sight, and they discovered bloodstains on the walls. They discovered a chain that was actually used to strangle his victims, and photos of his victims in plastic bags, all labeled with their names and ages. Javid kept a detailed record of all of his victims. So it makes me wonder, he would obviously, you know, lure them in by being sweet and kind and asking for their age and asking for their name and stuff like that. And the kids would have had no idea that this man would be sexually assaulting them and killing them. It makes me so sad, you know, especially because these kids are already going through so much by being beggars. They don't have much. They don't really have a home. Some of these kids had no families. While the police were searching the house, they also discovered 2 vats of acid with partially dissolved bodies in them. Javid had also handwritten a note saying that these vats of acid were left there purposely so that the police could discover them. He also wrote in his confession letter that after the police would have received the letter, he would go and drown himself in a river. But the river had netting, so that would have been unsuccessful. So because of this, they knew that Javid was well and truly alive, and the police conducted the largest manhunt known in Pakistan's history. Thankfully, he was actually found, and later on in court, he would go on to say that he actually wasn't guilty and that he was merely just a witness to these killings. The boys that he lived with were ages of 13, 15, and 17. And they were also arrested as accomplices to these killings, and they were found guilty. It's insane to me that these boys were so young that they could also partake in such acts. It is scary to think that Javid would have essentially influenced these young boys to do the same. But luckily, they were found guilty. Javid was found guilty and was given the death penalty. The judge actually made a very powerful statement in court, and I will read out what it says because I don't want to miss any parts of the quote. The judge said, "You will be strangled to death in front of the parents whose children you killed. Your body will be then cut into 100 pieces and put in acid, the same way you killed the children." The court also ordered that Javid would be hung by the same chain that he used to strangle the children. However, before Javid was executed, he hung himself in his cell. So then the parents never actually got to see him being executed, because I guess he didn't want the parents to have that satisfaction of seeing him getting executed. So he decided to take his own life before he could get executed. Or either he just didn't want to face these parents. That's very cowardly in my opinion, but it's good to know that this man could never ever be released and potentially kill more young boys. Javid said that his reasoning for these murders was revenge against police because they had assaulted him during an arrest in relation to another crime which he had apparently sexually assaulted another young boy. He said that his mother was so devastated to see Javid's decline and see his arrest that she had suffered a heart attack and died. So he said that he wanted to make 100 mothers cry for their sons as his mother had to cry for her son. It is so spine-tingling, and it literally gives me chills to think that he would think that this was the best way to get justice for his mother, as if his mother would want him to do something like that. It is just so devastating and so sad that these young and innocent boys had to have their lives ended by this disgusting, poor excuse of a human being and the people that he lived with. So that was another very full-on one. The last one is one that I've actually heard of before because, grossly, he was actually born about half an hour from where I was born in England. It's so scary to know that these people exist so close to you. It is just so scary. So the last of this list of the most evil murderers is Harold Shipman. Harold Shipman was a general practitioner who is known to be one of the most evil serial killers to date. Harold Shipman would sadly kill many of his patients who trusted him so much. You know, he was a doctor, he was their doctor, and they trusted him to have their best interest at heart. And it is just so ironic that they ended up dying by being murdered by someone that they trusted so much. Harold Shipman was born in Nottingham, England. He was the middle child and was born into a working class family who were actually quite religious. As a young man in school, Harold was actually a very accomplished rugby player and was really great in athletics. His mother would sadly get lung cancer, and Harold witnessed her health decline quite quickly, and she would sadly die when Harold was just 17 years old. On November 5th, 1966, Harold would get married and have 4 children with his wife. Harold studied medicine at the University of Leeds and graduated in 1970, and 4 years later he would start to practice. It's not really known whether Harold had plans of doing this to his patients from when he was studying, or he came up with this plan later on. Harold would go on to work in Manchester and in a few other clinics. He would end up starting his own clinic in 1993, and he was a very well-respected doctor. In March of 1998, Linda Reynolds expressed to the coroner for South Manchester District that she had concerns about how many patients were dying in Harold Shipman's care, especially because he had so many cremation forms that he needed to be countersigned. And she saw this as a real big red flag as to why there were so many people dying in his care and why there were just so many of these forms piling up. Why? What was he doing that was causing them to die under his care? There was an investigation that was conducted by the police, but there was just not enough sufficient evidence, so they stopped investigating any further. Harold then went on to kill 3 other patients after this investigation stopped. And a taxi driver that would take these elderly patients to Harold Shipman's clinic expressed concerns and suspicions to the police that he had suspicion that Harold Shipman had killed 21 of his patients, because a lot of the times this taxi driver would take these patients to Harold Shipman's clinic, but they would end up dying when they seemed perfectly in good shape and perfectly healthy. So, you know, his eyebrows started raising. Why are these perfectly healthy elderly patients who go to him are just ending up dropping dead like flies? So this was definitely a very good observation that was made by this taxi driver. On the 24th of June, Harold's last patient, Kathleen Grundy, was found dead in her home. Harold was the last person to have seen her alive, and he signed her death certificate and recorded her death to be of old age. When Kathleen's daughter was working out the will and stuff like that with the solicitor expressed to her that Kathleen's will did not look legitimate. There was something about the will that lacked authenticity. And that something was that the will excluded Kathleen's daughter and Kathleen's grandchildren. And this obviously was so odd because it said that the will that included the amount of £386,000 was to go to Harold Shipman. And it obviously is so bizarre that the amount in a will would go to the person's doctor. That is just very unheard of. The solicitor told Kathleen's daughter that she needs to go to the police straight away because there is something really wrong going on. So Kathleen's daughter informed the police of this and they started the investigation. Kathleen's body was exhumed and they did some examinations and conducted some tests and found traces of diamorphine in Kathleen's blood, which is not given to patients who are relatively healthy. This drug is only given to terminally ill cancer patients to reduce pain. And Kathleen did not have cancer and she was quite healthy. When the findings was expressed to Harold Shipman, he said that Kathleen was addicted to diamorphine. To prove this narrative, he would show police comments of Kathleen's report on his computer, which included a whole bunch of reports on her health, and he showed the police the comments that he had written about Kathleen's addiction to diamorphine. But these comments on Harold Shipman's computer was further looked into by the police, and the police actually found that these comments were only added after Kathleen's death. So this was sufficient evidence now to arrest Harold Shipman. So he was arrested on the 7th of September 1998. After his arrest, investigators found a Brother typewriter which was used by Harold to forge Kathleen's will. And upon even further investigation, 15 of Harold's patients who had died had their body examined and tested, and the investigators found a similar pattern of death as Kathleen's. And what he was doing to these poor patients was giving them a lethal dose of diamorphine and would sign off their death certificate as old age or poor health, which a lot of the time was absolutely not true. They seemed perfectly healthy with a lot more life yet to live. On the 31st of January in the year 2000, he was found guilty on 15 counts of murder and was sentenced to life imprisonment. However, the actual number of the patients that he killed was more like 250 elderly patients. Authorities said that he could have been charged with more counts of murder. However, because this case was so public, Harold receiving a fair trial would almost be impossible. Authorities said that even if Harold was convicted of all the murders or more murders, it wouldn't really change his sentence because he did receive the harshest sentence available. 4 years later, on the 13th of January 2004 at 6:20 a.m., Harold Shipman would hang himself with his bed sheets from his window. And this was a day before his 58th birthday. Once again, another serial killer who cannot face their punishment and does the cowardly act of taking their own lives because they cannot spend their life in prison and absolutely have no care in the world for the people, the hundreds of people that they kill. To this day, it is not understood why, not that it would matter, but what his motive was for killing these elderly patients. So those were a few of the most evil serial killers to date. I know that this was quite a full-on video, but this is one that I really was interested in doing. I would love to do more of these types of videos, so if you enjoyed this type of video, please let me know in the comments and I will definitely do more of these kinds of videos in the future. Maybe a women's list could be next, so let me know if you enjoyed this and I can get onto that for you guys. Like I said, guys, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. It will really help me out. And guys, please take care of yourselves. Please stay happy. Please stay amazing. And please stay as positive as you can. And I will catch you guys very soon. Bye.